Hey, folks. Welcome to A Friendly Orbit, the podcast that draws us together no matter how far we fly. I'm Ceres,
And I'm Thea.
and what a week, Thea. What a week it's been.
What a week indeed. We're so close to Arcane Season 2, can you believe it?
Are we?
That's the only notable thing about this week.
The only notable thing about this week, well, that's amazing. We should probably just become an Arcane podcast. No, actually, you know what, Thea? I actually kind of feel like there's so many notable things about this week. It's just such a vast quantity that I could barely number them.
Yeah? Well, that sounds about right. And as a matter of fact, speaking of numbers, I've heard so many numbers this week. And I've been reading so many numbers that I think I'm kind of fed up with them.
Well, without further ado, then, this week we're going to be talking about one of my favorite podcasts in recent time, Worlds Beyond Number, and seeing what lessons we can learn from it.
Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
So, Worlds Beyond Number is a D&D / other RPG podcast that is hosted by Brendan Lee Mulligan, as most often as the GM, Lou Wilson, Abria Iyengar, and Erika Ishii. So yeah, Worlds Beyond Number takes place on the world of Umora, and our three players and our three-player characters are Suvi, played by Abria Iyengar, who is a wizard of the Citadel, very powerful political institution that is very sort of, imperial and brass, and sound of trumpets, military parades, and scientific innovation. Then we have Ame, played by Erika Ishii. Ame is a witch, somebody who mediates between the world of human and spirit, and has a very sort of pastoral and kindly, precocious kind of aspect. Although Ame also is a little bit of a trickster, is a little bit of a sly person as well. And the last character is Ursulon, played by Lou Wilson, who is a spirit. So that should probably make the theme of the show pretty clear here. We have a world of mortals, a world of spirits, and somebody who mediates between the two. And as they go on their adventures, they of course learn more about each other and themselves, and they develop and grow and hopefully save the world from tearing itself apart. So far, as I said, it's not over yet, so we don't know what happens. It's been out for a little over a year now. They're on episode 37, is the current most active one, and they upload every other week, generally. And I've quite enjoyed it as sort of a contrast to, listening to the Critical Roles and other D&D podcasts of the world, because it has sort of its own unique stuff. And you listened a little to it, right, Thea? What'd you think?
So I watched episode 1, or I listened to episode 1.
I hope so.
And
if you watched it, you did it wrong.
I just stared at the episode description for 2 hours and 23 minutes without ever blinking.
How did that feel? Was that a good viewer experience?
I felt like I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the podcast the way it's supposed to be enjoyed,
Art is objective, as they say.
Art is objective. So I first impression. Let's say first impression. I'm sure that while you share your insights, more thoughts will pop up. But my first impression is you can tell that these people are like theater kids. Because I felt at many times that like they are playing D&D much more for the benefit of the audience than for their own.
Yeah. I
Like you
totally
can
agree
you
with
can
that.
tell you can really tell, like, man, if this was the three of us, I would never do it like this.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the first interesting things about Worlds Beyond Number. Actually, our first lesson beyond number, lesson A, is that you just don't need a system to play tabletop with your friends. Um, they barely use D&D rules. They use them a lot for checks. For collecting information, persuading people. They use them a lot for like social interaction checks, but they rarely have combat. They usually, in fact, have about one combat per narrative arc. There's been 3 so far. So you can imagine roughly one combat per like 12 episodes or so. And D&D is predominantly combat. And they've sort of addressed this before in the past. And Brennan used this metaphor of a kitchen. And he goes, I see 5e sort of as a kitchen, and the narrative is food. And when people tell me D&D doesn't have any narrative elements to it, so why are you using it over other more narrative focused games? He's saying, well, just because the kitchen isn't made of food doesn't mean it's not contributing to the narrative. And what he often what a stance he's defended consistently is, I need rules to tell me how a magical arrow flies in hypothetical fantasy airspace, but I don't need a rule set to tell me how to manage a character's motivations, how to create an interesting NPC, or create a character arc. And I think that philosophy really shows in what they make, and is one of the interesting things about their podcast, is that they don't use the system very much, and they don't need to use the system very much. And I think one of my first takeaways from the podcast is, I would encourage anybody who likes tabletop RPGs to try a session or two playing with no game system and seeing if you can still enjoy it, because I think the odds are you probably do. And a game doesn't need to have narrative elements in order to drive a narrative story. Although, if you prefer that, that's obviously legitimate. But I think it's something important to keep in mind.
So I think that that's not a lesson that is as generalizable as we might want it to.
Hmm.
And the reason is that you and I and the team of Worlds Beyond Numbers, or Worlds Beyond Number, get to play tabletop RPGs with friends that
Hmm.
they trust.
Yeah.
And I think that if you have friends that are in that you trust to kind of enjoy the narrative aspect of TTRPGs, I think you're absolutely right. But I think that for a lot of people, D&D is meeting new people online and hoping that they won't have to type up a story on r/RPG horror stories after
Yeah.
session 1.
Yeah,
And
I totally agree with that. I heard recently, I was watching James Introcaso, who is a game designer for Draw Steel,
Mhm.
talking about on his stream how Draw Steel is a low trust game because it has so many rules, and how rules light games are high trust games because they have so few. Um, I don't know if he came up with that, but I thought that was a really interesting way to categorize games, because I usually just call them like rules light or rules heavy, but calling them low trust or high trust, I feel, reveals what the rules are there for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, okay. So first, obviously, like in games that are competitive, the rules exist so that to ensure fairness, so that at the end, when somebody wins, you know that they deserve the win in a certain sense, or that they won by the rules at least.
Yeah,
While in
absolutely.
TTRPGs, that you don't, in TTRPGs that are not DM versus the players oriented, but are collaborative, the rules mainly exist as a framework to um, to make a story happen within an accepted boundary. So I think already in TTRPGs in general, rules generally aren't framed the same way that they are in other types of games with winners and losers.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but
because it's a
beyond that,
collaborative non-loser game.
exactly, yeah, exactly. So already there, I think a distinction should be drawn. But yeah, beyond that, as you just say, yeah, I
Yeah,
think that
hot
high
take by the
trust
way.
and low trust, yeah.
Hot take by the way. TTRPG players categorically can't all be losers. It's impossible. It's not a game you can lose.
Is that a pun? Are you doing the pun?
yeah, it is.
Okay.
Damn, I've never bombed out that hard.
I'm sorry. It took me a moment because I was thinking of a similar joke while I was saying like no winners and losers, but my joke was going to be a lot meaner than yours.
Mm,
And I was trying to see if all right.
okay. Anyway, sorry, what were you gonna say?
I don't know. Like you mean my joke? My joke was going
No,
to be that they
yeah, I
can't all be
interrupt.
losers because we're playing it.
Okay. No, I just interrupted you earlier.
Oh yeah, I mean I think I was just saying that the framing of high trust and low trust is also very very good. And I think that I know that you believe generally that like low like rules light games are good for like new players to introduce them to the concept of TTRPG without having to read the whole player's handbook or anything. But I think that now that you reframed as high trust and low trust games, maybe you can also see how on the flip side, perhaps a new player, especially a new player you don't know, but just like a new player in general, um, might benefit from from a low trust system, where there's more guidelines about what they can and cannot do and how to do it. Also, just as a DM, to not
Yeah,
find yourself wrangling with a player who says, "But the rules, nothing in the rules says I can't do that," and it's like, yeah, but that still sucks.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that one of my first takeaways is just that rules are there to facilitate the low trust or high trust or medium trust context you might find yourself in. If you do have the trust and the rapport with the group, you might not need as many rules as you would normally think, and you can get away with a lot, you know? Um,
Yeah.
because
I think I
honestly,
agree with
they
that.
don't really play D&D. I know they
Yeah,
say
that's
they
one of
play
the things.
D&D, and they're like, oh, I'm using the kitchen to heat the narrative, but that stove is not on, Brennan. They're not even doing any combat. It's all skill checks. It's an amazing show, but it's all skill checks. The rogue is the best class, bar none.
the Yeah, I actually found myself. It's funny that you said I found myself at some point in the story going like, wait, what are they playing? Did they say that they're playing D&D? Because like they hadn't used a single rule, so I was like, oh. Then at some point I heard like insight and survival, and I was like, I
Yeah,
still
yeah,
cannot tell for sure that this is D&D.
yeah.
Like these could be plausibly checks in Pathfinders or something, because I don't know Pathfinder.
The craziest part to me is then like even when there's are scenarios like a chase or something like that, Brennan often introduces like homebrew rules. Like, all right, you need to make a survival check and pick a lucky number on a D4. And then like they make the survival check, and if they pass the survival check, then he rolls the lucky number on the D. He rolls the D4, and if it's on your lucky number, you get away even if you failed the check. If you don't get your lucky number, but then it's just the success and failure of the D20 dice roll. And then if you get the unlucky number, which he introduced at a later point in time, then you lose even if you succeeded the check. You know what I mean? And
Oh,
and
interesting.
so he's creating these gradients of failure and stuff like that. Which nothing wrong with it. It was a great and amazing scene, but you're just like, even the parts where you do reach for the game system, you often don't use like actual 5e mechanics. Um,
Yeah, it's
uh,
like I need to break this to use to extend your metaphor. I need to break a nut. Oh, there's a walnut crusher right over there on the kitchen. And then he looks at it, goes like, yeah, then grabs a book and like hits the nut until it breaks.
yeah, exactly. And they do a really great job with it. And I think the thing that they actually use most from D&D is sort of the ingrained assumptions it has about magic. Just having like spell lists on hand and stuff like that, I think is what they use most. But a lot of that, I would say, in a way, is not really a mechanic. You know, like if enemy wizards built their city, or not, sorry, not if enemy wizards, if wizards built their city around the concept that you can dimension door between any corner of the city, that's like not really a mechanic. It's sort of more of a world building element, you know, and that's what they use a lot of, and I find that interesting.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the world is built around the assumptions that the D&D game system makes about the setting that you play it in.
Yeah.
Like the distinction between witches and wizards to me was like immediately clear how that is reflected in the game mechanics.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're talking wizards, we're talking arcana, and we're talking divine magic. More specifically, we're talking about a kind of a druidic divine magic.
Yeah, although
Actually, in the
it's a custom class as well,
uh,
by the way.
oh
So
oh,
that's
I did not know
that
that.
this is just even more layers on top of, you know, you're not really using D&D. Is
It's funny,
one of the
like
players.
he made. Yeah, I feel like making a custom class for a game that is mostly like
I
played
know.
without the mechanics is such a like you built a whole cabinet, they called the whole
Yeah.
new cabinet for your kitchen, and then you proceeded not to use it,
Yeah.
like for
And
99% of the time.
Suvi is also like a custom wizard subclass, so
Oh man,
it's yeah. Um
like at this point, it's not even like, oh wow, they're doing like they're being so like innovative. It's most like, why are they wasting so much energy? It feels like
yeah,
so
it
inefficient. They're playing it in
to
such an inefficient way.
yeah, to like use the metaphor, it's like basically, you know, you learned how to cook in a kitchen, but you're so well skilled that you don't need most of the tools in the kitchen. So every once in a while you go into the kitchen, you grab a knife or whatever, but you spend most of your time just getting the food straight out of the package. You don't need a kitchen to make it any more interesting. You know?
But also you again, like you built a whole new cabinet for your kitchen to hold that one knife.
Yeah, but it's based, you know. I mean, to remove myself from the metaphor now because it's getting more and more mixed, but
Yeah.
it's based on 5e, right? Like the class is
Yeah,
still
yeah,
based
yeah.
on 5e, and it's sort of the base philosophy that 5e kind of has. So it's kind of like, yeah,
I'm
I grew up
just
on 5e, and I don't really need a game system, so I can just kind of make my own game system by taking the very few parts of 5e that I actually need, slapping in some stuff that, you know, I know will work because I know 5e well, and then
Mhm.
here we go. Now we're playing. You know.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, how much making making a whole witch subclass was like worth it compared to just making
Yeah, not a
a
subclass,
cleric.
class.
Sorry, or just making a whole new class was compared to making just like a cleric and then swapping a couple of spells off the list and
Yeah,
calling it a day. Considering how much they use it,
yeah,
because obviously, if you're in Critical Role, where it feels like every session has a combat, or every other session has a combat, then obviously it's 100% worth it. But
yeah. And I do think that's like an interesting difference between the two. You're right. Critical Role leans into the system it's using way more.
yeah, and there it makes
Um,
sense to use up time and energy and effort to make up a whole new class or multiple subclasses. But I mean, listen, it works. Who am I to judge? And I'm sure that they had a lot of fun designing the witch class.
yeah.
So I'm not here to I'm not here to tell them not to have fun. On the topic of rules, I think I would like to say one more thing
hmm
before maybe we go a little bit more into the details. Like, some people like the rules, and some people like the builds and like the feat combos, and some people are really into the specific dice and mechanics, and like that's their way of enjoying the game. And I just want to say, like, it doesn't mean automatically that playing high trust system, or playing D&D 5e in a high trust way, is like automatically better or more
No,
enjoyable, or that you
no.
should
I
feel
don't think
bad for
there's.
not.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say that there's a more optimal way to play. What I'm actually trying to say is I encourage you to play without rules to see the purpose they serve by having them be absent. Because I think sometimes people stick to rules and hold on to them simply because they're there. And I think questioning, what do I actually need rules for in my game? What needs to be governed by rules in my game? And what role do rules serve? Maybe might reveal to the average player that you don't necessarily need a whole list of, stuff to keep your players in line and keep everyone on the same page. It might be that the fact that they're your friends already kind of keeps that in check. And that maybe the rules are getting in your way sometimes and you're sticking to them for no discernible reason, for no actual benefit, right?
Yeah.
But I think I play with rules, right? I think in a vacuum, I think rules are useful. They serve a function, and I encourage people to engage their game designer brains and try to figure out why they exist.
Yeah.
All right.
I see that, and yeah, I think that's a good button on this part, on this
Yeah.
topic. What's
All
your
right.
what you got for
B.
me? Lesson number B.
A young man in front of an old desk, covered in papers and knowledge accumulated throughout the ages, and yet dusted with indifference. In the center of the desk, a microphone, pointing at him, recording his every word, waiting for new knowledge to be imprinted. Brennan starts every episode by describing a scene in acute visual detail and highlighting the themes and contrasts he thinks are interesting. And at first, I was impressed, but as time went on, I realized it's just I became more impressed in a way. It's a really good trick for just starting an episode. It works so much better, in my opinion, than just, hey, so last week we da 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 da. Instead, he's doing what a director does when they do like an opening shot, an exposition shot. And it's a minor lesson, but I think it's one that's very useful.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was actually thinking about it today. I know, I mean, we are, for the listeners, we do play D&D, shocker. And we are coming to the conclusion of my
Don't tell them our secrets. How would they know?
Yeah. So, and we're coming to the conclusion of my campaign. My, at this point, more than 3-year-old campaign. Though I will point out that there was an 8-month sabbatical from it.
Right, so it's only 2.5 years long.
Yes, exactly, which is the correct amount of time to spend on a hobby.
Sure.
And I have, some would say, the ideal. And I was thinking, even though I'm at the end of the campaign, should I start doing that? Because I thought it was very effective. But
yeah, that's
obviously,
funny actually that you picked up on it, because like when I first heard it, I was like, oh, this is how he's going to open episode 1. And then eventually, I think I was like, it's kind of embarrassing. That was like on episode 20, and I was like, wait, he always does this, doesn't he? At first, I was just like, oh, there's always a convenient, beautiful visual moment. And then, like, eventually, I was like, no, he just does it. This is not an accident. This is extremely intentional.
tell me you have ADHD without telling me you have ADHD.
I think the one that did it for me is there's a moment where the party received shocking news, like cliffhanger shocking news, and the next episode he starts and he describes the perfect semicircular rotation of a sausage as it tumbles through the air, unburdened, falling from Ursulon's mouth to the ground, you know? And I was like, wait a minute.
There's a theme here.
That's not a visually impressive moment. It just sounds really visually impressive because he found the wonder in a small thing. And he had to do that because there was nothing else to describe. This is how he starts episodes.
Brandon Lee Mulligan, you sneaky bastard. You and your stupid subtext.
You
You and your
slipped.
stupid song.
You
You were
slipped this
slipping
intro
something.
past me 20 times, but now I caught you.
Yeah, it's like uh it's like you caught him. You finally caught him slipping the subtext in. It's like, fuck, I
Exactly.
got you now.
Yeah. And I think that's also something. I think if you think to yourself, but how am I going to find a visually impressive or interesting moment to record at the start of each episode? Um, I would encourage you to think more visually about your world and the world that you're world building, because I think any fantasy world will, in the small or in the large, have something interesting to look at that can give a little bit of subtext to whatever episode you're doing. An impressive mountainside, the view from a skyship, the rain and weather. It's just a nice exposition shot to sort of put you there. Instead of saying, "Where were we last time?" Instead of telling, I guess, you're showing in a way. Where are we right now?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to tell me that, but I think that is a great point. I think that yeah, I think I think that the most impressive part is to take the small bits,
Mm,
um, the small details, and make something special out of them. I
yeah.
don't want to sound reductive, but like I think that it's easy, mostly, to point at some majestic landscape
Mm,
or some flying aircraft, some wonder of magic, or a legendary beast, and
yeah.
make a point of how majestic it all is. But
I think
I
it's
thought
also.
when you were talking about the piece of sausage falling out of the mouth, that I was like, oh yeah, that's art.
And I think also one of the things that helps with this trick. So just to break it down, what is this trick? This trick is to find. I said before a lot visually impressive, but I think also sensorily impressive. One of the good things that he does in these things is he doesn't just describe how it looks, although he does, but also how it smells, how it feels, what someone might think when they look at it. How it might be interpreted. And I think
Yeah.
even as something as simple as, you could say, "Hey guys, welcome to the game. I hope you have fun tonight." You start off in front of Goblin Forest, and you're here to rescue hostages from a goblin base somewhere in the forest, right? That's a perfectly fine and normal intro. But I do think there's something really special if you can talk to them about the sunny light of the field they're standing in, and the deep shadows looming in the forest beyond, and the smell of moss and pollen and wet things that assaults their nostrils as the wind blows out of the forest and across the plains, or something like that. And, almost, and then you say something almost like an invitation to enter and explore, something like that. I think it really puts you there. And then you can say, yeah, and also, you're here to get goblins and hostages. Maybe you make up an NPC name, you're here with the farmer, Hagen or whatever, whose family was kidnapped by goblins, and he turns and says to you, blank, or whatever. It's all the same stuff. But it does taste a little better, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the word I would describe it is evocative.
Mm,
There is obviously, like, the more senses you manage to include in your description, the more comprehensive it feels.
mm,
Um, I think that more than bringing in the senses, what works really well, also in your example that you just gave,
mm-hmm,
is that it doesn't just tell you like what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it smells like, but like it tells you kind of what it feels like.
yeah,
It tells you already how you're supposed to feel about it,
mm,
which I think generally is like in writing is definitely something. Like in writing, I mean, in when you're writing a non-interactive piece of media, like a book,
yeah, yeah,
is definitely um, a good thing to keep in mind. That sometimes you don't have to push show don't tell, to its most extreme. Sometimes you
Yeah.
can just call a place melancholic. And I think that especially in an interactive medium where the audience isn't where you have your friends there, maybe one of them is eating from a bag of chips, and they're not 100% immersed, they're not cozy on their bed reading a book, but they're here to have fun, they're here to play with their friends, they're here to eat snacks. Sometimes it's just okay to tell them that the cemetery is melancholic. And when you do that, obviously it's better if you're very good at prose, to write evocative prose the way that Brennan does. But yeah, so that's kind of my
Yeah.
point. Sometimes tell, don't show. You can tell sometimes,
Yeah,
and
of
when you
course.
tell, you need to do a good job at telling.
I think my biggest piece of advice, or I feel like the trick to it, if you're like having trouble writing something sensorily evocative, is to just come up with sensations you've had in your life and pick one that fits this situation. You
Yeah,
know,
right,
like if
right.
you
What you
want
know.
to, exactly like it. You've stood at a cold bus stop. You've been in the hot. You have had the experience of hot, sticky sweat dripping down your back as you march through the stupid field towards your stupid goal. Right?
Hmm.
And so clearly, I'm telling you something as the DM. I'm telling you you're frustrated. You're frustrated and you're hot and you're uncomfortable. Right? But everybody's had that happen to them. I think none of you. No, if any of our listeners live on the North Pole and have never had hot, sticky sweat run down their back, please message us at afriendlyorbit@gmail.com.
Yeah.
But like in general, that's
Shout
just
out to
like a
polar
relatable.
bears.
Yeah, shout out to all the polar bear listeners. Exactly. That's right. We're a very inclusive podcast, and we include polar bears amongst us as well.
Yeah.
If you've ever been outside and it's raining and it's cold and you don't have a raincoat, and you know how miserable that is. It's like 100 times more miserable. It could be twice as cold. You wouldn't be as miserable, right? Those kinds of experience. Everybody's had to wait at a bus stop before, when the wind was blowing or something like that. So I would say, if you're having trouble with it, just pick a powerful sensory experience you've had in your life. Pick one that roughly fits the situation and go with it.
Yeah. 2 days ago, I had a brand new experience to add to my catalog of like adventure-like experiences that I will
Yeah.
for sure later on. Yeah.
Were you bitten by a
For our
radioactive
listeners,
spider?
I work on top of a hill,
Mm-hmm.
and we are recording this episode in early November.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself on that hill without a connection coming for an hour and a half. And
Okay.
I found myself urgently needing to be at the bottom of the hill. So in the middle at like 7 something with cold air and darkness because there is no illumination on the hill because it's like countryside.
Mm.
I started walking and I spent 50 minutes walking through on the side of a road, hoping that cars would spot me if they were coming. And I made it to the bottom. Obviously, it was all fine, but that was
Mm-hmm.
quite an experience.
Yeah. And I think that's actually great. Like, I think light is one of the great ones to fuck with people with.
Yeah.
How scary is a hole in the ground that's well lit? I mean, that's a basement. How scary is a hole in the ground that's not well lit? Very scary, especially if you need to walk through it and you don't know what it looks like. Um, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, it would have been crazy if that story ended with you dying. And now I'm a ghost
Ooh.
phoning in.
Yeah, exactly. And now I'm a ghost.
All right.
And I must say,
You
I'm
want to hear
enjoying my life as a ghost much better.
Oh, well,
I
that's
am
good. Yeah, I mean,
untethered.
you don't have those pesky physical sensations.
Yeah, exactly.
You
I
want to
don't
hear
have to
another
make food.
lesson? Yeah, that's true. Such a fucking robot. How can you? That would be a downside for most people. Do you understand that?
No, I don't need to cook anymore. The nightmare is over.
Oh my god. Yeah, Thea is like a robot. Thea eats like the way you tank up a car. Zero pleasure or enjoyment involved.
No, okay. I enjoy good
Not
food.
displeasure, by the way. Not displeasure involved either. Just fully neutral.
No, I enjoy good food. I enjoy good food a lot. But when it comes to my time, I choose to eat like a robot to reduce the amount of time I need to spend eating like a tank
Yeah.
rat.
All
Yeah,
right. My next lesson C, lesson C beyond number. I think
lesson
Worlds
number
Beyond
C.
Number. Yeah. Worlds Beyond Number is like a masterclass in one size fits you. I think a lot of people, and again, this is again a low trust, high trust situation. There's caveats to this, but I feel like a lot of people play D&D games as though they had to appeal to everyone. They make a setting in which every class and every published ancestry works. They make a setting that focuses on broad, universal topics that don't impinge too much on the players. And they play the game in a way that it would be friendly to the majority of players. But you're not playing with the majority of players. You're playing with like a group of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 specific individuals. And although I don't think most of us mere mortals will ever achieve the predictive capabilities Brennan has, where he knows his players so well and has been playing with them so long that he kind of knows instinctively exactly what they're going to do at every moment, and so you can always plan for it, and it feels like there's no loading screens in this universe, and the world is just boundless. Um, I do think you can and should tailor your game to the group you're playing with. I think you'll have more fun, and I think they'll have more fun. And we've done a little bit of this too in your campaign, Thea.
You want to elaborate a little bit more on that point?
Yeah, sure.
I'm
So
not.
I mean,
Yeah.
what we started doing is we started doing like 15-minute check-ins after every game,
Oh,
where we would talk
yeah.
about what happened and what we were planning on doing next, and did we enjoy stuff? And that feedback has really sculpted how the game works, how it runs, and what we do in a way that you know helps. It just makes the game easier to run. It's easier to run the game when you know what your players want from you and when you know what they think is cool.
Yeah, yeah, that is true. I think that more than anything, those little sessions have sort of reassured me about which parts of the game everybody was enjoying.
Yeah.
Um, we know that we have lost players in the past, and part of the issue was that they were not enjoying the style of play that we were
Yeah.
having, by which we were playing. And I mean, I don't even think that their expectations, not in every case, their expectations were so far off how we were playing. But if we had known, it wouldn't have been that hard to adjust.
Yeah.
Like
Totally.
maybe with the exception of Proteus, who's who would like who want a very different type of experience, where at some
Who
point
would
he
love
just
to
had
play in Worlds Beyond Number?
who would love to play in Worlds Beyond Number.
Zero combat, all social interaction.
Yes, it's all about little cozy homes and wizards and witches and spirits.
That's that's the one thing. I think it might be a little too dark because it's not all. It starts out all cozy homes and then gets sad. Gets real
Yeah.
sad as time goes on. Turns out
Yeah,
conflict happens, and
yeah.
bad
I
things to
remember.
good
Yeah,
people.
yeah. I remember. I remember the moment where Brennan offered Abria the chance to decide whether she would make it there on time or whether Grandma would be dead already.
Yeah.
I was like, "Whoa, okay, cool." But I also thought if that was me, if that was my player, I would immediately say she's dead already. Didn't make it.
I'm not giving you the chance to make the cool choice. I'm making the cool choice for you.
No, 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 no. If I was Abria,
Mm.
if I was the player, if I was
Oh, I
asked,
see. I see.
I
Yeah, I
thought,
mean, I personally think that's also kind of. I mean, it depends, but I think for a character I was playing, if I was in that situation, I think I would be like, yeah, nah,
yeah,
I missed her, and I feel bad
yeah,
about it. I feel a
I
little bit of
also
regret
don't.
in my tum-tum.
Yeah, I don't know. I have only listened to one episode, so I know only that much about her character.
Yeah.
But like, if there was any part of her character that was like she could have gone home to visit sooner, but she has kind of avoided going back multiple times.
Yeah.
Like at that point, you have to, right?
You gotta commit.
Yeah, like you gotta commit to the mistakes. Other like there needs to be you want the consequences. But no,
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that she still picked um
Yeah.
to meet her, and then that results in cool role play moments. So I'm not saying by any means it was the wrong choice. I'm just
Yeah.
saying
I mean,
I know I wouldn't have blinked.
yeah.
Mhm.
Grandma's dead. Yeah, but to circle back to the earlier part, this is a world in which like two lineages exist and work, spirit and human, and that is it. It's a world in which
Oh,
many
okay.
classes don't exist and work other than the ones the characters are playing. It's a world that has a form of storytelling that, and they talk about this in some of their fireside chats and stuff like that. A world, they talked about what kind of story they wanted to tell ahead of time, and they decided, they wanted to tell this very cinematic narrative where they're not tracking rations, they're not tracking arrows. Are you kidding? And I mean, technically, that's a 5e rule that you have to do that. They fully ignore it and they move on and they move beyond that. They
Yeah,
level up
I think there are
once
definitely
every
rules.
they level up once every arc. They were first level for it's crazy how much their station in the world is higher than their actual level, Like Archmage Apprentice, and the Archmages rule the Citadel as like a council of 12 or whatever, I don't know. Like Suvi's the Archmage Apprentice and she's a level 1 wizard, right? I don't think that would work in the majority of games, but they know they're not playing the majority of games. They're playing their game, and they're not scared of radically changing how their game works, because it's only for them.
Okay, and we're so yeah, I think that there is definitely a like world building 9 times out of 10 should be done to support the story. I think that we kind of get the idea of what a D&D setting should be like from Eberron, from the Forgotten Realms, from Greyhawk, from Dragonlance, because those settings are published and meant to be used by everyone. And so we have sort of internalized this idea of what a D&D world looks like. But for your home game or for your podcast, the world that you're building for one specific group of people, for one specific campaign, um, can be whatever you want. I don't think that the advice in the old Dungeon Master's Guide, because like I can't speak for the new one, haven't read it, but the advice that they give in the beginning, that there should be that there should be a place where these different monsters come from, and there should be this and there should be that. I think that that advice is a little misguided. I do see the point sometimes because I think, okay, can I make a world without demons? And then it's like, yes, but the spell conjured minor demon and conjure major
Yeah,
demon
exactly.
exists. So it's like at that point you need to kind of discuss it with your player. Maybe it's like you can cast the demon, you can summon a demon, and we can use a demon thingy, but we won't call it a demon. We'll call
Yeah.
it we'll call it a Balrog.
But that's
Or
exactly what you're saying. Like, exactly what you're saying is exactly the point. Is you can
yeah,
talk
but
to
you
your
can talk about it
players
with your yeah.
and adapt the game to work for you. You don't have to buy into every part of the game. Clearly, if Worlds Beyond Number says anything about 5e, it says you don't have to play it like a combat-heavy game. You don't have to play it like an exploration-heavy game. You don't have to buy into the 3 pillars of adventuring. You don't have to buy into every class working in this setting. You just need to buy into what your players like. So that's really the part I want to encourage people. If you're playing a TTRPG, if you're a GM or a player, sit down with your counterpart, talk about what you like, and try to narrow down the game so that it's only good stuff. You don't have to do any of the bad stuff. You don't have to engage with any part of the game you don't like. And there's really dramatic editorial changes you can make. And the game still kind of works. And since it's focused on what you like, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Um, yeah. Everybody always talks about tailoring the campaign to your players, but yeah, I think this is really like pushing it to another level.
Yeah. Like tailor the
Um,
setting, tailor the campaign, tailor the themes, tailor the game mechanics you decide to engage with. You can tailor all of that to be what you think is fun and what your players think is fun. And you don't, yeah, if you know what, if you hate the downtime rules, don't engage with them. That's okay. I understand if you want like better downtime rules, then you're gonna have to get creative. And I mean, Worlds Beyond Number does that too. But that's just one of the things I want to encourage people. If the book says you have to track gold and you hate tracking gold, stop tracking gold. It can be that easy sometimes. Not always that easy, but it can be. That's what we did. I told Thea, if I have to track another arrow on my character sheet, I am going to go insane. And Thea said, all right, let's stop tracking it. And the game was better after that.
yeah, and I mean, obviously with gold, it's a little bit trickier there, but you can make it work. But and there again goes the trust, right? Like
Yeah.
I trust that I trust that Ceres is here to play a game, to have fun, and to tell a story, a meaningful story where we take the plot seriously, because that's kind of the story that I'm running right now.
Yeah.
And so I trust that Ceres won't use the fact that we're not tracking money to buy infinite vases and then sell
Yeah,
them and
exactly.
then become
Yeah.
wealthy. But like obviously, if we were playing a different type of game, one where maybe a little bit more of a sandboxy game, where maybe it does matter a little bit more what resources we have, because we're trying to like build a home for ourselves, make a name for ourselves. Not even like a super heavy dungeon crawler, but like a game where our resources matter more, maybe then we would be tracking money a little bit more closely.
Yeah. I mean, if you found a way to make it fun, I would track money. That's kind of how I feel about it. It's not that people who like tracking money are wrong. Just for me personally, I don't think I should have to do it in a game unless I find a way to make it fun, and I haven't so far. Um, but yeah, I think you're like I think you're totally right on that. It is a trust situation. If you say, look, for anything minor, let's say below roughly 5 gold pieces, I won't charge you and we won't track that. And I say, oh, is that true? I'll buy 1,000,000 croissants and I will sell them all at cut rate prices and I make infinite money, or whatever. It's just like, well, okay, then you abused my trust and you don't get to have as much fun anymore, and that's your own problem and your own fault.
Yes.
But if
Yeah.
you do have that trust and that rapport with your players, I encourage you. That is the carte blanche. That is the license to do some really interesting things. And in the end, like we say with Worlds Beyond Number, you might not even really be playing D&D anymore. But those guys have a good time on that podcast. That's what matters to you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like yeah, the rules are a tool, one of the many tools that you use at the table, and like you don't always have to use that tool, and
Yeah. Yeah.
you don't even need that tool sometimes, and that's fine.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, I have many more lessons that I think you could draw from Worlds Beyond Number, but I think this is a good number that we've got going so far. Did you have any closing thoughts? Anything you wanted to say?
Um, I think that I will listen more. I think I
Yeah.
had a very good time. I I'm not one to listen to a D&D podcast for too long before kind of needing a break from it. But the
Yeah.
fact that you already told me a little bit that there are like arcs makes me looking forward to kind of finish one arc and then take a break from it.
Yeah.
But I definitely look forward to listen more to it. Do you
Yeah.
have any final bit on the topic?
I think the only last thing I would say is, I encourage people, if you want, check out the podcast Worlds Beyond Number. You can find it pretty much anywhere. It's it's a great ride. the one thing I would say, if you are listening critically and thinking like, what can I learn from this? What can I take from this? I do think one last important thing maybe to say is these are professionals with a professional sound design studio behind them. There is a certain je ne sais quoi about every episode that you probably can't replicate at home with a simple trick. You got to put in your 10,000 hours into improvisation and DMing the way these people have. So just because your game doesn't look like this podcast and you like this podcast doesn't mean your game is bad. It just means that you are what you are, a hobbyist, an amateur, and that's okay. So I do want to point out that you can overdo it. You can take too many lessons away from podcasts at times. But I think the three we had today, turns out you can number them. The three we had today are good starting points.
Yeah. All right. Do you have anything to plug this
Do I have anything to
before we
plug?
go?
Yeah, so last week I plugged voting. In light of last week, this week I'll plug taking a nice walk, getting a little break from things, getting a little bit of distance. Go take a stupid walk for your stupid mental health, and then get back to it because there's still hope out there in the world.
Mm. So,
You got any plugs for us?
my last week has been very full of emotions and also of stuff to do. So, since we're on topic of D&D, I have rewatched the D&D movie.
Oh yeah, it's on
With a
Netflix
friend.
now, right?
It's on Netflix. Well, it's here on Netflix, depending on which country you're in. But I
Yeah. Okay.
showed it to a friend. So that was my excuse to rewatch it, and I think it holds up really, really well to multiple rewatches.
Nice.
I had a lot of
Nice.
fun. I can't say I had any new epiphanies, but to anyone who hasn't seen it yet, I would definitely tell you to watch it and to recommend it to a friend who maybe doesn't play the game, because I think it's definitely very enjoyable even if you haven't like played the game. They did a very good job there. So
Awesome.
yeah. I also noticed there were maybe a couple of moments where it the the story kind of winks at you, the D&D player, with like, this is such a D&D moment, right?
Yeah.
Not enough that it's obvious, but like on this secondary watch, I definitely thought a couple of times, this feels just like that.
Yeah, I think the D&D movie was really great back when I watched it, and I enjoyed it. And I do agree. Like over time, I've seen like memes pointing out like D&D isms about it. Like uh, character shows up, is there for one arc, and then leaves all of a sudden. It's like, yeah, that player moved, or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I do think I
also
totally agree. Great
yeah.
movie.
Yeah, I also found it funny. There was a moment where I thought, oh, minimum amount of damage, broke concentration on a massive spell. Funny.
Yeah. All right. Maybe I'll have to rewatch it to find that specific moment.
Okay. Well, anyways,
Well, alrighty, folks. That'll just
yeah.
about do it for our second episode. If you want more, you can find us on youtube.com/@afriendlyorbit, as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you happen to have any astral echoes you want to share with us, you can email us at afriendlyorbit@gmail.com. All one word.
All right, Ceres. I'll talk to you later. And to all our fellow Voyagers, we will catch you out there amongst the stars.